The bar on Nexus Station never really got dark, but somehow the corners always felt like they were full of shadows. Commander Vexthon sat in one of those corners, watching the phosphorescent liquid swirl in his glass. The drink glowed a soft blue that matched the natural luminescence of his crystalline body. He had been coming to this place for 3 years now, always sitting in the same spot, always alone. Tonight was different. The bar was crowded with young soldiers from a dozen different species. They had just finished their training exercises in the nearby systems and were celebrating their success. Their voices filled the air with boasts and laughter. "The Krathari fleet is the strongest in the galaxy," declared a reptilian warrior, his scales shifting from green to red as he spoke. "Our ships have never lost a battle in over 200 years. "That's because you've never fought the Morvac swarm," countered a 6-legged insectoid, clicking his mandibles. "We defeated 3 empires before joining the Galactic Council. Our hive mind tactics are unstoppable." A young Zalathi warrior, his crystalline form bright and clear with youth, joined in. "Both of you forget that the Zalathi Empire once controlled a third of known space. Our resonance weapons can shatter planets." Vexthon's form dimmed at hearing one of his own kind speak with such pride. The youngster couldn't have been more than 50 cycles old. He had never seen real war. The conversation turned, as it often did among young soldiers, to the various species they might face in combat. Someone mentioned humans, and the group erupted in laughter. "Humans," the Krathari soldier hissed with amusement. "Those soft pink creatures? They can barely survive on their own planet without machines to help them. Their bodies break if you just push them too hard." "I heard they need to sleep for 8 hours every cycle," the insectoid added. "Imagine being that weak. My kind can fight for days without rest." "They only live for about 100 years, the young Zalathi said. "Some of our weapons are older than their entire civilization. What could such primitive beings possibly do in a real war?" The laughter grew louder. Other soldiers joined in with their own jokes about human weakness. They talked about how humans needed special suits just to survive in space, how they could die from something as simple as losing too much blood, how their bones could snap like dried twigs. Vexthon set down his glass. The sound it made against the metal table was soft, but somehow everyone heard it. The crystalline commander stood slowly, his forearms unfolding as he rose to his full height of 3 meters. His body, usually a swirl of blues and purples, had gone dark, almost black. Among the Zalathi, this was a sign of deep disturbance, of memories that caused pain. "You younglings know nothing of fear," Vexthon said. His voice carried the harmonics of age and experience, resonating through the bar's atmospheric processors. The translator units everyone wore struggled to convey the emotion in his words. "You've never faced the humans in war. Pray to whatever you worship that you never do." The bar fell silent. Even the background hum of the station's machinery seemed to quiet. A few of the older veterans in the bar, the ones who had been drinking quietly in their own corners, looked up. They recognized something in Vexthon's tone. The young Zalathi warrior, bright with the confidence of youth, spoke first. "Commander, surely you exaggerate. Humans are known as traders now, diplomats. They run cargo ships and build mining stations. How dangerous could they really be?" Vexthon turned his 4 eyes to the youngster. "What is your name, youngling?" "Kexaval, Commander. 3rd Regiment Stellar Guard." "3rd Regiment," Vexthon repeated slowly. "Fresh from the academy. Tell me, Kexaval, how many battles have you fought?" "The training simulations prepared us for—" "Simulations!" Vexthon's form pulsed once, a sign of bitter amusement. "I have fought in 43 campaigns across 6 spiral arms. I have seen the Morvac swarm consume entire systems. I have watched the Krathari fleet burn worlds to glass. I have stood on planets where the Void Hunters left nothing but empty cities and silence." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice had dropped to barely above a whisper. Yet everyone in the bar could hear him clearly. "But nothing in all my centuries of war frightened me like the humans did." The Krathari soldier, trying to maintain his pride, spoke up. "Commander, with respect, how could a species that can die from a simple infection be more frightening than the Void Hunters?" Vexthon moved toward the center of the bar, and the crowd parted before him. Other veterans were watching now, some nodding slowly. They knew. They remembered. "Sit," Vexthon commanded, gesturing to the tables around him. "All of you, sit. You want to know about humans and war? I will tell you. I will tell you why, 15 years after the war ended, I still see their faces when I enter sleep cycle. I will tell you why veteran soldiers of the greatest militaries in the galaxy will cross the street to avoid passing too close to a human. The young soldiers looked at each other, uncertainly, but began to gather around. Some pulled chairs from other tables. The bartender, old Morvac, whose compound eyes had seen too much, dimmed the lights slightly and stopped the music. He had heard versions of these stories before. Vexthan returned to his table and picked up his glass again, staring into the glowing liquid. The human-Zalathi War lasted only 3 standard years. In our empire's history, it is barely a footnote. We have had border skirmishes that lasted longer, but those 3 years changed everything. A few more veterans had moved closer, drinks in hand. One of them, a scarred Krathari whose scales were more white than green with age, spoke up. I was at Kepler 442b. Vexthan's form flickered in recognition. Then you know what? Keksaval asked, his brightness dimming with uncertainty. That humans don't fight wars like we do, the old Krathari said. They don't fight for glory or conquest or even survival. They fight like something else entirely. Like what? Someone asked from the crowd. Vexthan was quiet for a long moment. Around them, the station continued its rotation, artificial gravity holding them all in place, but it felt like the universe had paused to listen. Like demons, Vexthan finally said. Like the vengeful spirits from every species' darkest myths. They fight like creatures that know they're going to die and have decided to make that death mean something terrible. The commander took another sip of his drink, then set it aside. It started with Kepler 442b, a small human colony, maybe 3 million souls. Farmers mostly. Some scientists studying the local ecosystem. A few military observers, but nothing significant. The Zalathi Empire decided we needed that system for its resources. It should have been a simple annexation. 3 days, maybe 4, and it would be ours. He paused, his 4 eyes focusing on something beyond the bar, beyond the station, looking back through years to a place he wished he could forget. The siege lasted 3 months. 1 human battalion, 600 soldiers held off our entire 3rd Legion. 12,000 of the Empire's finest warriors against 600 humans who knew they were going to die. But how? The young Zalathi asked. Our weapons, our shields, our technology. That was our first mistake, Vexthan interrupted. Thinking that wars are won with superior technology. Humans taught us otherwise. They taught us that wars are won by whoever is willing to go furthest into the darkness. And humans? Humans were born in that darkness. They evolved in it. They made it their home. The bar was completely silent now. Even the usual sounds of the station seemed muffled, as if the universe itself was leaning in to hear what came next. Let me tell you about Kepler 442b, Vexthan began, his voice taking on the rhythm of a storyteller who has told this tale to himself 1,000 times in the dark. Let me tell you about the first time I learned to fear a species that should have been beneath our notice. Let me tell you about the day I discovered that humans had a word for what they became in war. A word that has no translation in any civilized language. He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of every young soldier who had been laughing moments before. They call it hell, and they brought it with them to the stars. Vexthan's crystalline form shifted through darker shades as he began his story. The young soldiers around him leaned forward, their earlier mockery forgotten. The bar had become a confession chamber, and every soul present could feel the weight of what was about to be shared. Kepler 442b was supposed to be easy, Vexthan began. The planet had no military value. It was just a farming colony with some research stations. The humans had maybe 600 soldiers there, local defense forces really. We came with 12,000 of our best warriors, full orbital support and enough firepower to crack continents. He paused, taking another sip of his glowing drink. The first day went exactly as planned. We sent the standard surrender demands. The humans requested time to evacuate civilians. We gave them 12 hours because we were feeling generous. The Zalathi Empire was not without mercy. The old Krathari veteran snorted. That was the first mistake. Yes, Vexthan agreed. But we didn't know it then. We watched their shuttles leave, packed with children and those too old or sick to fight. We thought they were being sensible. We thought they understood they couldn't win. A younger soldier, a Morvac, raised a claw. What happened after the 12 hours? We landed, Vexthan said simply. 3 drop sites around their main settlement. Perfect deployment, textbook formation. We marched toward the colony expecting token resistance before surrender. His form darkened further. We found the colony empty, completely abandoned. Doors left open, meals still on tables, but no humans. Just a single message painted on the side of their command center. What did it say? Keksaval asked. You should have left us alone. The temperature in the bar seemed to drop. Several of the younger soldiers shifted uncomfortably. We thought they had fled into the wilderness, Vexthon continued. Our commanders laughed. They called the humans cowards. We set up our base in their colony using their own buildings. That was the second mistake. The commander's 4 eyes closed briefly, remembering. The first night, nothing happened. We posted guards, set up our perimeter, and settled in. The second night, that's when it started. Music. They played music from hidden speakers all around our camp, not war drums or battle hymns. Children's songs. Lullabies from Earth. Why would that be frightening? Someone asked. Have you ever heard a human lullaby? Vexthon asked. They sing their children to sleep with songs about death. Rockabye Baby, where the infant falls from a tree. Ring Around the Rosy, about a plague that killed millions. They prepare their young for death from birth. But that wasn't the worst part. He gestured with one of his forearms, and his form pulsed with remembered distress. The songs were mixed with something else. The crying of Zalathi younglings. Somehow they had recordings of our own children in distress. The sound frequency was perfectly tuned to trigger our parental protection instincts. Soldiers started breaking formation, searching for younglings that weren't there. Some went mad in the night, attacking shadows. The bar was completely silent except for Vexton's voice. We found the speakers and destroyed them. The next night they used new ones. We sent patrols to hunt them down. The patrols never came back. We found them later unharmed but unconscious, with messages carved into the ground beside them. Go home. Last warning. We don't want to do this. But they were just farmers. The young Zalathi protested. How could farmers do this? Vexthon's laugh was bitter, a discordant harmony that made everyone wince. Farmers. Yes, they were farmers. Do you know what humans farm? On their homeworld, they domesticated predators. They took wolves, killers with fangs and claws, and turned them into companions. They took aurochs, massive beasts that could gore a hunter, and turned them into cattle. Humans don't run from dangerous things. They make them useful. He continued, his voice growing harder. After a week of psychological harassment, we'd had enough. We decided to burn them out. We started firing into the forest, using our resonance weapons to shatter trees to leave them nowhere to hide. That's when we learned the third lesson about humans. When you corner them, when you leave them no choice, they stop trying to warn you. The commander stood again, pacing slowly. The attacks started immediately. Not on our warriors, not at first. On our equipment. They had mining charges, industrial explosives meant for breaking rock. They used them on our vehicles. They poisoned our water supplies with industrial chemicals. They turned farming equipment into weapons. Have you ever seen what a molecular harvester does to living tissue? It's designed to separate wheat from chaff at the cellular level. It works just as well on Zalathi crystal structure. Several soldiers looked ill, even those from species that didn't usually show such emotions. We still outnumbered them 20-1, Vexthon said. So we pressed forward. We had to show strength. The Empire's reputation demanded it. We sent a full assault force to take the research station where we believed they were hiding. 3,000 warriors in powered armor with full air support. He stopped pacing and faced his audience directly. We found the station empty except for one human. A single soldier sitting in a chair in the middle of the main lab, surrounded by strange devices we didn't recognize. She was small even by human standards. She had been wounded, blood seeping through bandages on her leg. She should have been terrified. What did she do? Someone whispered. She smiled, Vexthon said. She looked at 3,000 warriors and she smiled. Then she said, "You really should have accepted our surrender offer." Before anyone could respond, she pressed a button. The commander's form flickered rapidly through different colors, a sign of extreme agitation. The devices were speakers, but not for sound. They broadcast something else, a frequency that interfered with our crystal harmonics. Every Zalathi warrior in that room fell to the ground in agony. Our crystal structure began to resonate at a frequency that caused incredible pain. Not enough to kill, just enough to incapacitate. And the human? She stood up, limped to our commander, and took his weapon. Then she activated her communicator and said, "Now." That's when the rest of them came out of hiding. Not from outside. They had been in the station all along, sealed inside the walls, breathing through tubes. waiting in spaces so small that most species would have gone insane from claustrophobia. They had been there for days, listening to us walk above them, waiting for the right moment. Vexthon sat back down heavily. They didn't kill the warriors. They could have, easily. Instead, they stripped them of weapons and armor, gave them basic supplies, and pointed them toward our base. 3,000 warriors, the pride of the Empire, sent back like scolded children. The message was clear. They could have killed us all. They chose not to. That should have been the end, Kexaval said hopefully. They showed mercy. Surely the Empire recognized it as an insult, Vexthon interrupted. Our commanders were furious. We had lost face. So we escalated. We called in the fleet, began orbital bombardment of the forests. We decided if we couldn't have the planet, we would leave it a lifeless rock. The old Krathari veteran spoke up. That's when they stopped holding back. Yes, Vexthon agreed. We thought we had seen human warfare. We were wrong. We had seen human restraint. When we started the bombardment, when we made it clear we would destroy everything they had built, everyone they were protecting, that's when we learned what humans were really capable of. He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of each young soldier. They call it total war, when survival isn't the goal anymore. When winning isn't enough. When they decide that if they're going to die, they're going to make sure you remember them forever. The commander pulled up a holographic display from his personal device. It showed a military recording, grainy and distorted. This is from the helmet camera of one of our stormtroopers, 2 days after we started the bombardment. We had sent them to investigate why one of our orbital strike coordinates had gone silent. The recording played. It showed Zalathi warriors moving through a destroyed forest. Trees turned to ash. Ground turned to glass from the heat of orbital strikes. They approached what had been their forward operating base. The buildings were intact, but something was wrong. Where is everyone? A young soldier asked, watching the recording. Keep watching, Vexthon said quietly. The warriors in the recording entered the base. The first thing they saw was a message, written on every wall in every room in the Zalathi language. You killed our home. Now we are death. The warriors moved deeper into the base. They found their comrades in the mess hall. All of them. 1,200 warriors sitting at tables as if they were eating a meal, but none of them moved. None of them responded to hails. Were they dead? Someone asked. No, Vexthon said. They were alive. But the humans had done something to them. A paralytic agent in the food supply. Something that shut down voluntary movement but left them conscious. They could see, hear, feel everything, but they couldn't move, couldn't speak. The effect lasted for weeks. The recording continued. The rescue team tried to help their paralyzed comrades, but then alarms started going off. Environmental warnings. The base's life support had been sabotaged. But not to fail immediately. It had been reprogrammed to slowly replace the oxygen with carbon monoxide, slowly enough that they wouldn't notice until it was too late. The silence in the bar stretched on after Vexthon finished his account of Kepler 442b. Several of the younger soldiers had ordered stronger drinks. Others sat staring at nothing, trying to process what they had heard. The old Krathari veteran who had confirmed being at that battle was slowly scratching patterns into the metal table with one claw, lost in his own memories. Finally, the young Zalathi, Kexaval, spoke up. His crystalline form had dimmed considerably since the start of the story. You mentioned other incidents. The ghost ship. What was that? Vexthon looked at him for a long moment. Are you sure you want to know? You already look like you won't be sleeping well tonight. We need to know, another soldier said, a Morvac engineer whose 6 legs were tapping nervously against the floor. If humans are really that dangerous, we need to understand why. The commander signaled the bartender for another drink. The old Morvac brought over a full bottle this time, setting it down without a word. He had heard these stories before in pieces from other veterans. He knew Vexthon would need it. The ghost ship, Vexthon began, pouring himself another glass of the glowing liquid. It happened 6 months after Kepler 442b. The war had spread by then. What started as a single system dispute had become a proper conflict. The humans were angry about our bombardment of their colony. We were angry about the humiliation they had caused us. Both sides were mobilizing. He took a sip, then continued. I was commanding a battle group in the Sigma Draconis system. We were hunting human supply ships trying to cut off their logistics. War is won by supply lines as much as battles, and we thought if we could isolate their forward bases, They would have to surrender. Sound strategy, one of the military academy graduates commented. It would have been, against any other species, Vexthon agreed. But we were still learning about humans. We found one of their ships drifting near an asteroid field. The Perseverance, a medium-sized cargo vessel according to our scans. No engine signature, no power readings except minimal life support. It looked like it had been attacked by pirates or suffered some catastrophic failure. The commander's form shifted, colors swirling slowly. Standard protocol was to board and investigate. The ship might have supplies we could use or intelligence about human movements. My second-in-command, Torval, led the boarding party. 50 of our best warriors in full combat gear. A trap? Kexval guessed. We checked for that, Vexthon said. Scanned for explosives, weapons, energy signatures. Everything came back clean. The ship was dead in space, barely functioning. We detected human life signs, but they were weak, scattered. Maybe a dozen crew members, probably injured or dying. He paused, staring into his drink. Torval and his team boarded through the cargo bay. The artificial gravity was failing, fluctuating between normal and 0G. The lights were mostly out, just emergency lighting casting everything in red. They found the first bodies floating in the corridors. Dead? Frozen. The humans were wearing emergency suits, but they looked like they had been dead for days. Frost covered everything. The ship's heating had failed along with most other systems. Torval reported that it looked like the crew had tried to seal themselves in different sections as systems failed, but the cold had got them anyway. The commander pulled up another holographic display. This one showed the internal layout of a human ship. They moved deeper into the ship, heading for the bridge. They wanted to access the ship's computers, find out what had happened. Along the way, they found more bodies. Some looked like they had died fighting something, weapons in hand, but there was no sign of what they had been fighting. A nervous tension had built in the bar. Even the veterans were leaning in, though some of them clearly knew this story. The bridge doors were sealed, Vexthon continued. Torval had to cut through them. Inside, they found something that made no sense. The bridge crew were at their stations, still in their seats, but they were all dead. Had been for at least a week according to the scans. But the ship's log was still recording. Someone had been making entries after the crew died. How? Someone whispered. That's what Torval wanted to know. He accessed the logs. The last living entry was from the captain, saying they were under attack by unknown forces. Then nothing for 3 days. Then new entries started appearing. But they weren't typed. They were voice recordings, and the voice was the captain's. Even though she was sitting right there, frozen solid, definitely dead, Vexthon manipulated the hologram, showing text from a ship's log. The entries said things like Day 4 after death. Systems failing. Crew remains at stations. Mission continues, and Day 7 after death. Borders detected. Protocols activated. They will join us. What protocols? Kexval asked, though he looked like he didn't want to know the answer. We found out soon enough, Vexthon said grimly. Torval tried to download the ship's data, but the moment he accessed the main computer, everything changed. The doors sealed. Not just on the bridge, throughout the entire ship. The emergency lights went out completely, leaving them in absolute darkness except for their suit lights. The commander's form pulsed with distress. Then the recording started. Voices over the ship's communication system. The dead crew speaking, welcoming the boarding party, telling them not to be afraid. That death wasn't so bad once you got used to it, that they would all be together soon. But they were dead, someone protested. Dead can't speak. The humans had programmed their ship's AI with recordings of their voices, Vexthon explained. Hundreds of hours of recordings, enough for the AI to synthesize new statements. But that wasn't the worst part. The ship's life support didn't just fail. It reversed. Started pumping out the oxygen, replacing it with carbon dioxide. But slowly. So slowly that our warriors' suits couldn't detect it at first. He took another drink before continuing. Torval realized what was happening and ordered his team to return to the boarding point. But the ship had other plans. Bulkheads started closing randomly, separating the team. Artificial gravity reversed in some sections, increased to crushing levels in others. The temperature dropped to near absolute zero in some corridors, while others heated to furnace levels. The ship was fighting them. The ship was hunting them, Vexthon corrected. And all the while those voices kept talking. The dead crew explaining what was happening to each warrior as they were trapped. You're in Section 7. The temperature will reach lethal levels in 3 minutes. We're sorry. We didn't want this. But you shouldn't have come. The commander stood, pacing again. I listened to it all from my command ship. Heard every moment. Torval managed to keep most of his team alive, finding ways around the ship's traps. They made it back to the cargo bay. The boarding shuttle was still there, waiting for them. They started to board it, relief in their voices. He stopped pacing, facing his audience. That's when the real trap was revealed. The shuttle's systems had been infected the moment it docked. A virus, but not a normal one. It was designed specifically for our technology, our crystal-based processors. It must have taken the humans months to develop it, to test it. They had turned that entire ship into a delivery system for a weapon we didn't even know existed. What did it do? Kexval asked. It spread through our communication systems first, Vexthon said. Every ship in the battle group that had received transmissions from the boarding party was infected. The virus didn't destroy our systems. It changed them. Made them see human life signs where there were none. Made them ignore Zalathi distress signals. Made them target our own ships as enemies. The horror on the young soldiers' faces was evident. Within an hour, half our fleet was compromised. Vexthon continued. Ships firing on each other, navigation systems failing, life support systems turning against their crews. We had to completely shut down all networked systems, essentially crippling ourselves to stop the spread. What happened to the boarding party? 30 made it back to the shuttle. The shuttle made it halfway back to our command ship before its engines overloaded. We learned later that had been programmed too. If the shuttle had docked with us, the virus would have had physical access to our main systems. The entire fleet would have been lost. Vexthon sat back down heavily. We destroyed the human ship, of course. Vaporized it completely. But before we did, we received one last transmission from it. A video message recorded weeks before we arrived. It was the human captain, alive, sitting on her bridge. He pulled up another hologram. It showed a human woman in a military uniform. She looked tired but determined. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the cargo vessel Perseverance, the recording said. If you're watching this, it means you've boarded our ship. I'm sorry for what's about to happen to your people. We voted on it, the whole crew. We could have just rigged the ship to explode. But that would only take out one of your vessels. This way we might save more human lives. The captain in the recording paused, then continued. We're already dead. We knew that the moment your fleet entered the system. A cargo ship can't outrun warships, can't outfight them, but we could make our deaths useful. Every member of my crew volunteered for this. We recorded thousands of hours of audio. We programmed our AI with every possible scenario. We created something that will haunt you. But the bodies, someone said. Vexthon stared at his empty glass for a long moment before beginning. The bar had become even quieter, if that was possible. Someone had dimmed the lights further, as if the darkness would make the story easier to bear. Theros 5 was a mining world, the commander began, rich in rare elements perfect for the Empire's needs. We took it early in the war, before Kepler 442b, back when we still thought this would be a simple conquest. There was a human research station there, about 3,000 scientists and support staff. They surrendered immediately when our fleet arrived. Smart, one of the younger soldiers commented. We thought so too, Vexthon said. We needed miners, and humans were physically capable of the work. So we kept them as laborers. The research station became a prison camp. 3,000 humans digging in our mines guarded by 500 Zalathi warriors. It should have been simple. The old Krethari veteran made a sound that might have been a laugh. Nothing with humans is ever simple. No, Vexthon agreed. But it seemed simple at first. The humans worked. They didn't resist. They followed orders. For 6 months, everything was efficient. Production was even higher than expected. The camp commander sent reports praising the humans' work ethic. He paused, his crystalline form shifting through subtle color changes. We didn't notice the small things at first. Humans getting sick in patterns that meant certain individuals were always in specific places at specific times. Tools going missing and then being found exactly where they should be. Tiny amounts of chemicals disappearing from the mining supplies. So small that it was written off as measurement error. They were planning something, Kexval said. For 6 months they planned, Vexthon confirmed. But not just an escape. That would have been understandable. Expected even. No, the humans were planning something else entirely. They were studying us. Studying. The research station had been for xenobiology, Vexthon explained. These weren't just any humans. They were scientists, experts in alien life, and we had locked them in a camp with 500 Zalathi guards. We had given them 6 months to observe us, to learn about us, to understand us in ways we didn't even understand ourselves. The commander called for another bottle. The bartender brought it immediately, his compound eyes reflecting the dim light. The first sign of trouble was the sickness, Vexton continued after taking a drink. Guards started falling ill. Nothing serious, just a mild disruption to their harmonic frequencies. Made them uncomfortable, unable to focus. The camp doctor couldn't find the cause. It seemed to strike randomly. Poison? Someone asked. Parasites, Vexthon said. The humans had deliberately infected themselves with local parasites. Harmless to them, their immune systems could handle it. But they knew that when the parasites reproduced, the offspring would carry traces of human DNA. And those traces, when they spread to us, would cause an allergic reaction. Not enough to kill, just enough to weaken. They turned themselves into biological weapons. They turned themselves into carriers, Vexthon corrected. Every human in that camp was infected. Every breath they took released microscopic parasites. Every surface they touched became contaminated. And we couldn't stop it without killing all of them, which would have ended the mining operation. He took another sip, but that was just the beginning. While the guards were dealing with the sickness, the humans implemented Phase 2. They had been teaching the local wildlife to associate our crystalline harmonics with food. What wildlife? Kexfile asked. It was a mining world. Tunnel rats, Vexathon said. Small, nearly blind creatures that lived in the mine shafts. Normally they avoided anything larger than themselves, but the humans had been training them for months. Using stolen food, specific sounds conditioning them. One night, thousands of them swarmed the guard barracks. They didn't attack us. They just wanted the food they had been trained to expect. But having thousands of creatures crawling over you through your sleeping quarters, it was... He paused, shuddering slightly. It was psychological warfare. Guards couldn't sleep. Couldn't rest? The rats would disappear during the day and return at night. We tried to exterminate them, but they lived too deep in the mines. We tried sonic barriers, but the humans had trained them to ignore those frequencies. So you had 6 sleep-deprived guards, the Krathari veteran said. That's when they made their real move. Yes, Vexthon said. But not an escape. Not an attack. They did something far worse. They started a religion. The confused looks around the bar would have been amusing in other circumstances. A religion? Someone asked. They called it the Church of Inevitable Liberation, Vexthon said. They held services every evening after work. Singing, mostly. Human songs about freedom, about endurance, about hope. We allowed it because it seemed to keep them calm. We didn't understand human religion. We didn't understand what they were really doing. He pulled up another hologram, this one showing surveillance footage from the camp. Humans standing together singing, their voices harmonizing in ways that seemed impossible for individual beings. They were synchronizing, Vexthon explained. Every human in that camp learned to breathe in unison, to move in unison, to think in unison. They turned 3,000 individuals into a single organism with 3,000 bodies, and they did it slowly over months, so we never noticed the change. That's not possible, a young Morvac engineer protested. Individual minds can't just merge. They didn't merge, Vexthon said. They synchronized, like a school of fish or a flock of birds, each one still individual but moving as part of a whole. And once they achieved that synchronization, they started the next phase. They began to sing specific frequencies. The same frequencies that were making the guards sick? No, Vexthon said. Frequencies that resonated with crystalline structures. With our structures. They had studied us for months, learned exactly what sounds would affect us. And 3,000 voices singing in perfect harmony could generate enough sonic energy to cause actual physical effects. He showed another piece of footage. Zalathi guards clutching their heads, their crystalline forms fracturing slightly at the edges. We tried to stop the singing, Vexthon continued. But how do you stop 3,000 humans from humming? Even when we separated them, they could hum quietly in their cells, and the combined frequency still had an effect. We tried punishment, but they would take the punishment and keep humming. Some would hum while being beaten, their voices never wavering. You could have killed them, someone suggested quietly. We needed the miners, Vexthon said, and killing them would have been admitting defeat. The Empire doesn't kill prisoners who are simply singing. It would have looked like weakness. Besides, by then it was too late. Phase 4 had already begun. There was a Phase 4. The children, Vexthon said simply. The bar fell silent again. There were families in that research station when we captured it, he continued. About 300 children. We kept them with their parents thinking it would make the adults more compliant. Another mistake. The children weren't just prisoners. They were students. The adults taught them everything. Mathematics, science, engineering, but also other things. How to move silently. How to fit into small spaces. How to remember complex patterns, he paused, taking another drink. Children could go places adults couldn't. Vents, maintenance shafts, drainage pipes. They mapped every inch of that camp and the surrounding area. They learned guard rotations, security codes they overheard, the location of every weapon, every weakness. And they did it while playing games while being children, so we never suspected. Surely you watched them, Kexval said. We watched them play, Vexthon said. We didn't realize their games were training exercises. Hide and seek taught them to avoid detection. Tag taught them to move quickly through the camp. Simon Says taught them to follow complex instructions without hesitation. Every game had a purpose. When did you realize? Someone asked. When the uprising began, Vexthon said. One night after the singing, everything happened at once. The children had sabotaged every alarm system using nothing but stolen wire and their own saliva, which apparently conducts electricity. The adults moved in perfect coordination, 3,000 people acting as one. They didn't attack the guards. They simply surrounded them, moving in patterns that herded them into specific areas. He showed more footage, humans moving like a liquid, flowing around obstacles, always maintaining specific distances from each other. They had turned themselves into a living prison, Vexthon explained. Each guard was surrounded by exactly 17 humans at all times, maintaining a precise distance. Close enough that the guard couldn't use ranged weapons without hitting multiple targets, far enough that they couldn't grab anyone. And they hummed. That continuous horrible humming that made our crystal structures ache. How long did this last? 72 hours, Vexthon said. For 3 days they maintained perfect coordination. No human slept. They had trained themselves to sleep in shifts while standing, some sleeping while others in their group stayed awake, all while maintaining the formation. When guards tried to break free, the humans would simply flow around them, reforming the prison. What about supplies? Food? Water? The children, Vexthon said. Vexthon didn't sit back down. He stood at the table, his forearms resting on its surface, his crystalline form now showing deep veins of black and purple that spoke of memories that caused actual physical pain to recall. The other veterans in the bar had moved closer, forming a loose circle around the gathered soldiers. They knew this last story. Some had lived it. The war had been going for 2.5 years, Vexthon began. Both sides had lost much. Worlds burned, fleets destroyed, entire populations displaced. But strategically, the Empire was winning. We had more ships, more soldiers, more resources. The humans were brave, clever, terrifying even, but they were running out of options. He straightened, his form pulsing slowly. That's when our intelligence service intercepted communications about something called Project Ragnarok. We didn't know what it meant. Ragnarok was a word from their mythology, something about the end of the world. We assumed it was desperation, one last superweapon they were trying to build. Was it? Kexval asked. Yes and no, Vexthon said. We captured a human data courier near Proxima Centauri. The ship was carrying encrypted files, technical specifications. It took our best code breakers weeks to decrypt them. When they did, they thought it was a mistake. The files didn't describe a weapon. They described a modification to their faster-than-light drives. The Morvac engineer perked up. FTL drives can't be weaponized. The energy requirements alone, that's what we thought, Vexthon interrupted. But the humans weren't trying to weaponize the drives themselves. They were planning to weaponize the ships. Every human vessel, civilian and military, would have their FTL drives modified with a specific protocol. If triggered, the ship would jump to FTL on a collision course with a target. Any target, planets, stations, other ships. But the ship would be destroyed, someone said. Yes, Vexthon confirmed. But do you understand what happens when an object traveling faster than light hits something? It's not just an explosion. It's a space-time rupture. A single small ship could crack a moon. A cargo vessel could destabilize a planet's core. And they were planning to modify every human ship with this capability. The bar was silent as the implications sank in. But that wasn't the worst part. Vexthon continued. The protocol had a name, the last argument, and it came with a list. Every Zalathi world, every military installation, every population center, each one matched with the exact mass and velocity needed to destroy it. They had done the math, calculated down to the last decimal how to end our entire civilization. They were bluffing, the young Zalathi said weakly. They wouldn't have. The courier ship, Vexthon said quietly. When we tried to capture it, the crew activated their modified drive. They jumped directly into our flagship, the Pride of Zelath, our most advanced dreadnought, 12 kilometers long, shields that could withstand a star's corona. It was vaporized, along with the 3 ships nearest to it. From one small courier ship, he pulled up a holographic display showing the aftermath. Where a fleet had been, there was now just debris and a strange distortion in space that sensors couldn't properly read. The message was clear, Vexthon said. They had the technology. They had the will. Every human ship was now a potential relativistic missile. But even that wasn't what ended the war. What ended it was what we found when we investigated their colonies more carefully. The signs we had missed, the preparations they had been making not for victory, but for something else. What preparations? Kexval asked. They were training their children for war, Vexthon said simply. Not their military academies. All their children. Every school had added survival courses. Every child above the age of 10 knew how to maintain weapons, treat wounds, recognize enemy species' weak points. They had distributed manuals to every household. The Citizen's Guide to Resistance. Instructions on how to make explosives from household chemicals, how to sabotage occupation equipment, how to organize resistance cells. The commander's form flickered rapidly, but that still wasn't the worst part. We found shipping manifests, medical supplies being distributed to every human world, specific medical supplies, drugs that would suppress fear responses, increase aggression, reduce the need for sleep, enough doses for every human above the age of 14. They were going to drug their entire population? Someone asked, horrified. If necessary, Vexthon said. They called it the Berserker Protocol. Every human of fighting age would be chemically modified to feel no fear, no pain, no hesitation. They would fight until their bodies literally couldn't function anymore, and then the next generation would take their place. He showed another document. This was from their military command, a projection of casualties if the war continued. They estimated they would lose 80% of their population in the first year of the Berserker Protocol. They considered this acceptable. Acceptable? Kexval's voice cracked. The report concluded, Vexthon said, reading from the display. While the cost in human life would be regrettable, the complete annihilation of the enemy would be assured. Even if only 1% of humanity survives, that will be enough to rebuild. The enemy will have no such opportunity. The old Krathari veteran spoke up. Tell them about the vote. Vexthon nodded slowly. When this information reached the Empire's War Council, they called for an immediate session. Every general, every admiral, every strategic advisor. We spent 3 days reviewing the intelligence, running simulations, trying to find a way to win against an enemy that was prepared to turn every ship into a weapon, every adult into a berserker, every child into a soldier. The simulations, he continued, all came to the same conclusion. We could win. We could conquer human space. But the cost would be the destruction of 70% of our own worlds, 90% of our fleet, and casualties in the billions. And at the end, we would have gained nothing but dead worlds and the hatred of any surviving humans, who would never, ever stop fighting. So you voted for peace, someone said. We voted for survival, Vexthon corrected, but the humans weren't done teaching us. When our ambassador went to negotiate, the human representative, a small elderly female named Ambassador Chen, brought a box with her. Inside were datapads, thousands of them, each one containing a message from a human who had volunteered for the suicide missions. Personal messages, to their families, their children, their friends. The commander's voice dropped. She made our ambassador read them. All of them. Messages from mothers to children they would never see grow up. From children to parents they would never see again. Love letters from couples who had volunteered together. And every single message ended the same way. This is worth it if it keeps humanity free. Then Ambassador Chen said something I'll never forget. Vexthon continued. She said, this is not a threat. This is not a negotiation tactic. This is simply information. Every human ship you see is crewed by people who have already said goodbye to their loved ones. Every human adult has already accepted that they may need to become a monster. Every human child has already been taught that they might be the last generation. We have already mourned our losses. We have already accepted our deaths. The question is, have you? The silence in the bar was absolute. The peace treaty was signed within a week, Vexthon said. Full restoration of all human territories. Reparations for damages. Technology sharing agreements. Everything they asked for. Because we finally understood something. We had been fighting humans. But humans had been fighting extinction. And a species fighting extinction has no limits. No boundaries. No point at which they stop and say, this is too much. He looked around the room, meeting every eye. That's why we fear humans. Not because they're strong. Not because they're smart. But because they're willing to pay any price. Bear any burden, commit any horror if it means their survival. They will turn their own children into weapons. They will turn death itself into a strategy. They will look at the end of their own species and say acceptable losses if it means taking their enemy with them. Vexthon picked up his empty glass, stared at it, then set it down again. After the treaty was signed, I asked Ambassador Chen a question. I asked her if they would really have done it. Would they really have activated all those protocols, turned every ship into a bomb, drugged their entire population, sent their children to war? What did she say? Kexval asked in a whisper. She smiled, Vexthon said. That same terrifying smile all humans have. And she said, Commander, the fact that you have to ask means you still don't understand us. We would have done all of that and worse, but here's the real horror for you to consider. We wouldn't have done it because we were desperate. We would have done it because it was logical. Because it would have worked. Because winning isn't about being stronger. It's about being willing to do what the other side won't. The commander turned and began walking toward the bar's exit. Then he stopped and looked back. There's a human trader who comes to this station regularly. Nice fellow, sells earth foods and crafts, always has a joke and a smile. His name is Marcus Chen, Ambassador Chen's son. He was 15 during the war. I've seen his medical records. He was already dosed with the berserker drugs, just waiting for activation. He had already been fitted for a combat suit. He had already recorded his goodbye message.